I've been having a blast on Rafa. His Peacebreaker cannons do an excellent job of taking out rippers and blasting through order bosses. Plus, the overdrive mechanic means you've got a proper need to speed, thanks to the absolutely massive movement speed bonuses you get while it's active. If you like going fast, Rafa is the character for you. And I experimented with several different setups, but ended up settling on Bullet Buddy Deluxe combined with volatile hollow points, instead of the measly shoulder guns from inferior Rafa build. Just kidding, just kidding. Any Rafa build's fine. But hey, having some personal rocket launchers with infinite ammo, that's pretty fun, and certainly is a blast, especially for the enemies that get blasted. Throw in the fireworks shield that give you more missiles, which scale incredibly well off of Rafa's passives, and again, those can clear room while you focus on taking out the badass. Then to top everything off and fix my single target damage, I grabbed a nice beefy Jacobs shotgun with spread launcher, so I could delete entire health bars in a single shot. I found this build to be great starting around level 6 when you get the first augment, all the way up through Ultimate Vault Hunter mode. So now let's get into a little bit more about the skill passives, items, and specializations that make everything tick. So now let's talk about skills and skill progression. The first thing to take is either Deft Hands or CTR. CTR is a really good generic damage bonus, but Deft Hands feels really good because it increases your fire rate. Ultimately, the choice between these is kind of up to you, and it won't matter in the long run because you're going to take both. So after you put 5 points in, you unlock your first augment with Instinto and Bullet Buddy Deluxe. Personally, I really liked Bullet Buddy Deluxe while leveling, especially when combined with a very high damage weapon, such as a Jacobs shotgun. You can take advantage of the effect where your action skill can be actively used to cause your guns to no longer use ammo. This way, you just get to hold down fire, no reload, just shoot. In addition, the incendiary damage is quite nice against enemies that have flesh health bars, and exploding bullets is very fun. So for the early game, I would highly recommend Bullet Buddy Deluxe, and this is still the augment that I use on bosses. However, once I got to around late hard, sort of reaching level 50, swapping over to Ultimate Vault Hunter mode, I started using Instinto a lot more when out in the open world. This is because you can keep your action skill active for an incredibly long duration, and you get a whole bunch of damage bonuses while you do. So I found that this felt really, really good in the open world when I'm actively killing tons of enemies, and this worked for bursting down a boss. Now, if bosses start to stay alive for a much longer time, maybe I'd use Bullet Buddy Deluxe in Ultimate Vault Hunter 5, where there's more health scaling. That said, I do think this is also better if your damage falls behind on bosses. So if you're not able to burst them down, blow away entire health bars, go for this because it's better over the long term. If you need burst damage and want to condense everything into a short window, go with Bullet Buddy Deluxe. Also, again, just a personal game feel, I would say Bullet Buddy Deluxe feels awesome. Regardless of your choice, put 5 points into Huerga. Whenever Rafa critically hits, action skill duration is restored. This really helps your action skill duration, regardless of which augment you chose. Now, remember at the top, I said it didn't matter if you took Deft Hands or CTR? That is because at this point, you take whichever one you didn't select before. This unlocks the next row of augments, which, in my opinion, are all worse than these two. So instead, you're going to put 5 points into Asymmetric Warfare. This gives a damage bonus to indirect projectiles. Not only does this include the Peacebreaker cannons, but it also includes the rockets from fireworks, making both your single target damage and your clear speed much better. From here, put 1 point into Hostile Acquisition. This gives you lifesteal based on your indirect projectiles. Again, fireworks and Peacebreaker cannons. This adds a huge amount of sustain and means that you do not need to use your rep kit primarily for healing and can instead dedicate it to damage. After that, put 4 points into Errant Spark to unlock the first capstone. Select Double Auto Shot. This turns the Peacebreaker cannons into shotguns. They are highly effective at close range, and the ricochet effect is pretty nice, though I wouldn't say super important because it's only a 10% chance. But basically, it makes them function like a Jacobs weapon. After this, grab 1 point in Lateral Plinking to give even more ricochet chance on your indirect projectiles. From here, you want to come over to the far right tree. This is where you're going to be putting most of your points next, starting with Everdrive for increased overdrive duration. Overdrive is Rafa's Vault Hunter trait, and it gives a nice movement speed and damage bonus. From there, you'll want to put points into Temerario. Now, the more points you have, the faster your gun's accuracy decays while overdrive is active, but also the more gun damage you get. Personally, I find that it is a little bit hard with 8 ranks. Sure, 80% gun damage, huge, but minus 80% accuracy, kind of, sort of. Gun handling and accuracy aren't necessarily a one-to-one translation, but a lot of stuff at medium and long range does start missing with 8 ranks. So if you find that it's pretty uncomfortable, you can always put points into Barrage. I have not really experimented with Devil May Care. I think it might be good for farming due to the additional movement speed, but I'm not so sure about that Rafa takes increased damage part. Seems a little sus. But after allocating 5 points, you get access to Volatile Hollow Points, which is going to be the build's final capstone. This replaces Peacebreaker cannons with rockets that deal splash damage. And while you're here, you'll also want Soldado, a kill skill that doubles all of your overdrive bonuses for even more damage. The reason I really like Volatile Hollow Points is the splash damage from the rockets is really good against vile enemies, it's good against AoEing down a group of foes, and also it's just really fun to watch big rocket explosions. Now, in terms of Soldado, I do have +1 from a class mod. I am not entirely sure if this means my overdrive bonuses are doubled, or my overdrive bonuses are tripled because it's +100 and then +100 again, or if they are quadrupled because it's doubled and doubled again. If you don't have it from the class mod, don't worry about that. Also, if you have an answer, please let me know down in the comments. From here, start taking some quality of life effects by going into the other trees for Arc Knives and Apothis Lance. First up, in your green tree, take 5 points in Expedite. This way, when overdrive is active, you get an additional 25% movement speed. This is genuinely excellent quality of life. After that, head over to the blue tree and take the Thrill, an overdrive skill that while overdrive is active, you gain a whole bunch of fire rate. You get fire rate regardless, but it's even better while overdrive is active and probably gets doubled from all the overdrive doubling bonuses. With all of that done, you have 2 points left, and honestly, it is up to you where you put them. A couple of things to call out. Venganza is very funny. When your shields get fully broken, you spawn a grenade, which if you have a good one, can absolutely nuke enemies. And if you have one that has big AoE, can absolutely nuke yourself. Another really good option is Errant Spark. You get 8% additional damage on your Peacebreaker cannons and your fireworks. If your fireworks is incendiary, this is 16% damage. And as for the last point, personally, I'm going to put it into Resiliencia because I actually feel pretty darn squishy, and with all of the overdrive bonuses, this gets to be a significant amount of damage reduction. Now, last up, I do want to talk about a potential late game swap once you obtain the Dancer class mod. The Dancer class mod increases your overdrive bonuses by 100% and causes overdrive to end whenever Rafa's action skill ends. So it makes things like Everdrive a little bit less valuable, which in my opinion means you can spec the tree 5 points into Barrage, 5 points into Temerario, and still take the Volatile Hollow Point. As long as you are frequently using your action skill throughout its duration, you're probably not going to be noticing the Everdrive effect all that much. Just keep in mind that your overdrive bonuses are more likely to fall off if you aren't actively using your action skill as much as you should be, which is something that I am very much guilty of at several points in this video. And so now is a good time to talk about equipment. First up, the bread and butter of this build is any Jacobs shotgun with spread launcher. If you've seen some of the boss one-shots or health bars being blown away in the earlier footage, that is thanks to the spread launcher alt-fire that spawns on Jacobs shotguns. You fire 5 grenades that hit quite hard individually, but combined they do absolutely massive damage. The way you get that insane burst is with a rep kit that has the amp effect. On use, grant increased damage of a next shot by 200%. So instead of it being about 24,000 times 5, now it is about 72,000 times 5, which is absolutely absurd and may even get nerfed. The rest of the stats on the gun don't matter that much, just get the best spread launcher you can find. That said, if you're using the Bullet Buddy version of the build, a shotgun that has high damage and low magazine count is also a very effective weapon. You get to completely ignore the low magazine and the reloads, just keep on firing and blasting enemies. Up until pretty recently in the end game, that is what I was doing, and this was my main weapon because it's a pretty darn lucky drop from level 48. Now, in addition, I like having a couple of elemental guns. All right, let's try this again. As I was trying to explain my other guns, the game crashed, and now some of the icons are missing. They'll load in slowly, but, it's only a multi-billion-dollar company. They need all the help they can get. They can barely put things together in working order that give you actual proper performance. So, in addition to the spread launcher gun, I like to have a couple of elemental guns. Basically, I want to cover at least 2 of the game's health bars. So, in this case, I have a shock weapon that I really like in the superconducting plasma coil. And then I have an incendiary weapon that I really like in the Transcendental Stellium, which is a Malawan shotgun that has a pretty darn good ailment chance and high ailment damage per second. Last but not least, I am using a Tenkei's Wave. This is one of my favorite shotguns, just because you get to fire it a lot. The projectiles kind of skate along the ground, does really good damage, and you do not continue to build up heat while Bullet Buddy is active. It's very much an acquired taste. Sometimes your projectiles will bounce off terrain or otherwise miss an enemy. So far, I've had a lot of success with it, and I've found it to be very fun. As for the superconducting plasma coil, honestly, I do like the burst effect, but if you don't have this legendary, or you don't want to go farming for it, you don't need to. Go ahead and just use any Malawan SMG. And pretty much the same here, this could be a Malawan SMG or a Malawan shotgun. I like the shotgun with the big explosion burst damage, A, because I like explosive weapons, and B, because the status effect is fairly easy to inflict with Bullet Buddy and does a very significant amount of damage. This will absolutely blow away shields, and it will absolutely blow away flash health bars, whereas this is very effective on bosses due to the incredibly high rate of fire, and most bosses are so big that you don't really miss, even if you're using an SMG with really low accuracy because you're playing Rafa and nuking your own accuracy. Now, in addition, again, any rep kit with AMP, this just happens to be one of the first that I got that also had the order effect for 2 charges. Low cooldown is good, extra charges are good, pop this and nuke a boss. Speaking of nuking, I also really like the Jacob's throwing knife, specifically with the penetrator augment, where damage to the impacted enemy automatically becomes a critical hit for 5 seconds. So what you can do is throw a knife, pop your rep kit, shoot an enemy with a spread launcher. Now the spread launcher gains 200% damage and auto crit. In other words, the enemy is deleted from existence. And that is how I did some of the big health bar deletions. In this case, the grenade cooldown reduction is also quite nice, and the damage amplification for 15% more damage against those targets. Now, for the class mod, Dancer is really good. That said, if you can't find it, Pinpoint Instigator is also quite nice. The main difference here is Pinpoint Instigator works very well against bosses, not so great against trash and in the open world, as you don't really want your Peacebreaker cannons firing at new enemies. And then any Exosoldier class mod with things like Asymmetric Warfare and Errant Spark is a very good alternative as well. For shield, get Fireworks. You can farm this from Splash Zone, the game's first boss. Try to go for one that deals incendiary damage so that it gets all the additional bonuses from your passives. Really, while you're leveling, any of them will do. Once you get to the end game, go for incendiary. And if you want to know more about that, video up in the card and down below. Last but not least, enhancements. Enhancements are very powerful if you have 4 guns with similar licensed parts. And in fact, I could probably get away with something like the Piercer, where Jacob's licensed parts have a 20% chance for a critical hit. However, I have been using this enhancement not for the headringer effect, but because the gun fire rate, accuracy, and magazine size feels really good. As for what firmware should you use, I like Godkiller for the extra damage against badasses and reduced damage taken from badasses, GOOJFC, which I don't know if that stands for action skill cooldown, and Deadeye for some additional accuracy. I would take a 3 set of Deadeye for the accuracy, crit damage, and crit damage stacking, and then 2 of GOOJFC for the additional action skill cooldown and damage. But if I couldn't find this, then I'd probably go with either 2 in Godkiller or 1 in 1. Either way, firmware is kind of an endgame grind for once your gear has stabilized and you are no longer frequently replacing items. Last up, specializations. The first thing I recommend is putting 1 point in Survivor so that you can get sturdy stuff. This significantly increases the duration of Fight for Your Life and lets it fully restore your health. I like this because the build tends to be a little bit squishy, and this is a good way to recover. After that, put points into Sharpshooter and Runner. I recommend starting with Sharpshooter and filling out 10 points here. This way you get down but not out, and if you want in the zone, though I don't aim down sights all that much, so I don't think it's super important. The real reason for 10 points here is to unlock Daredevil. After that, 10 points in Runner. Unfortunately, you won't get any passive effects until you get Bullet Train. This is really good for gun damage while moving. Always be moving, enemies can't hit you that way. Then you start speccing out Daredevil. The first thing you would take is Now with Caffeine. But as you keep speccing this tree out, personally, I would drop Down But Not Out for I Am a Gun. And then I would drop either Bullet Train or Now with Caffeine for a Honed Mind, which results in this. And after that, put some points into Brute for additional gun damage. If you want to use Lead or Alive for the increased fire rate and damage in place of Sturdy Stuff, you can. I would say this is good if you know you're going to be able to kill an enemy before you die, whereas this is good if you're struggling. Personally, I found it was better in the early game, and in the late game, I have been using Lead or Alive, and it's felt quite nice. And so, like I said at the top of this video, the build has been a blast. The only downside I can think of is it's at times a little bit squishy. Luckily, you have plenty of damage to trigger a second wind effect, or just kill the boss and, you know what, if you die, let's cash anyway. While Fireworks provides excellent clear, and a spread launcher is great for demolishing bosses, neither of these things are required. They are certainly good, but if you don't have them yet, that's totally fine, especially while leveling. Really, all you need are your Peacebreaker cannons, and since that's an action skill, thankfully you'll already have them. I especially like the feel of Bullet Buddy Deluxe, since while the active effect is up, I can just keep firing without consuming ammo, which is great for any sort of gun that has a limited ammo magazine. For bosses and tanky badasses, start with your throwing knife. For that damage amp, pop your rep kit, then hit him with a good old spread launcher. On the other hand, if you're clearing, just put up your Peacebreaker cannons, pick your favorite gun, start blasting, and watch for ricochets do the rest. But next up, I want to talk about a couple of these interactions in more detail. First, Fireworks. Why is this so good? Number one, because it's largely a passive bonus. As you kill enemies, they release a spread of rockets that strike nearby foes. But there are a couple of things you can do to maximize that damage bonus. The first is finding a class mod with either Errant Spark or Asymmetric Warfare, as both of these bonuses apply to the missiles from Fireworks. Then, you can farm Splash Zone, who drops this item, until you get the Incendiary version. I found this takes quite a while, so I don't recommend farming it until you're around level 50, but if you happen to drop it earlier, hey, that's pretty awesome. I'm still using like a level 45, that's just the best thing I've found so far. The Incendiary missiles gain double the bonus from Errant Spark, and they are great at taking out squishy, agile enemies because, let's be honest, most of those have flesh health bars which are weak to incendiary damage. Oh, and this is also a good way to stop Rippers from sneaking up behind you, because the missiles don't care. Now, the next big interaction is Bullet Buddy Deluxe. Whenever you use your action skill with this augment, your guns do not expend ammo for 8 seconds. This feels great on pretty much every gun in the game, but it is especially effective on guns with a small magazine size, such as a Jacob shotgun, guns with a very high rate of fire, such as a Vladov SMG, or guns with a COV licensed magazine and heat buildup. You can use this to effectively freeze the energy gain, which allows you to take advantage of bonuses at high energy. My personal favorite use for this is Jacob shotguns. They have phenomenal damage, some of the highest in the game. The rate of fire is a little bit lower, but the bullets ricochet to nearby enemies, and sometimes you'll just shoot one guy, all his friends get taken out by the ricochets. Last but not least, there is the one-shot potential of Spread Launcher. This fires grenades in a fan shape, so at a distance, only 1 or 2 grenades are going to hit your target. But at close range, all 5 can overlap, resulting in some of the highest damage in the game. Now, there's a couple ways to maximize this. First, make sure the enemy has the Penetrator debuff from your knife. This way, any hit, including from the spread launchers, is a crit. Next, activate your rep kit for that plus 200% damage amp on your next shot. Then, get close enough and nuke away. There are other dynamic buffs such as Overdrive, which are great, but I wouldn't say are required, especially if you're ahead on the gearing curve. Once you get to like UVH 4 or 5, you're going to have to pay attention to stuff like that, but if you're just leveling, don't worry about it too much. That said, since you want to do this at fairly close range, do be careful. These spread launchers are splash damage. If you have explosion AoE, you can always damage yourself. Good news is, most of the time, if I knock myself with a spread launcher, the rockets or just killing the boss will give me a second wind and I won't lose any cash. But in short, this build is a blast to play, and it's also very versatile. Even if you don't have a spread launcher, a fireworks, or a Jacob's knife, it's still going to feel good, especially while leveling. And so that's it for the Rafa build that I played from level 1 all the way through level 50, and I even used to explore some vaults. That's right, imagine a vault hunter actually doing vault hunting. From the start, the thing that attracted me to the build was the Peacebreaker cannons, plus Rafa's vibe kind of reminded me a little bit of Zero from Borderlands 2. Once I got things like fireworks and a spread launcher, the build went from great to amazing. I especially like the volatile hollow points, since I found vile enemies and shooting their crystals to be a relatively annoying mechanic, especially if you're using a gun that has low accuracy, which I was doing most of the time because I was intentionally lowering my gun's handling. None of that matters if you have a ton of splash damage, just aim in the enemy's general direction and everything in the explosive radius will get hit. Thankfully, volatile hollow points does indeed have splash damage, and if you're still leveling, you can always use a Torg gun instead. Since the setup's so flexible, whenever I got a cool new legendary, I just put it on and try things out. That's how I settled on both the Plasma Coil and Tenkei's Waves. But I'm sure there are plenty of other strong legendary options. And let me know if you found any really cool guns that synergize with this build down in the comments below. And so that's it for my Bullet Buddy Peacebreaker Rafa build. I've certainly had fun playing it, but at this point I've about had my fill of Borderlands 4. Yes, there is technically more content to do. I could grind all the way up to Ultimate Vault Hunter 5, I could play a completely different character or a different build on the same character. But I've played through the story, I got to level 50, I'm good. So, if you're interested in future content I make, then do be sure to get subscribed. Also, if you have some experiences playing Rafa, do feel free to share them down in the comments below. But for now, I'm going to get going. Thank you very much for watching to the end. Leave a like if you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one, whatever I end up playing.